We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
In the classic dystopian novel Fahrenheit 451, the fire chief, Beatty, he attempts to make the hero of the tale understand why book burning has become the accepted form. He says, if you don't want a man unhappy politically, don't give him two sides of a question to worry him. Give him one. Better yet, give him none. His point being that if the questions are not even asked, then the blinded man does not even know there is a question to be asked. And it seems we're fast approaching this point in modern politics. Ask a question and prepare for the incoming. Don't question the orthodoxy of the progressive worldview. Don't consider how science can ever truly be settled. If you do, you may be risking more than you know. Welcome back to Liberty Nation Radio here on the Radio America Network. I'm your host, Mark Angelides. And on today's show, we talk about the mind of the mass shooter, failures in White House communication, impeaching a Supreme Court justice, and a whole lot more besides. I want to take a moment to say a special thank you to our listeners out in Evergreen, Alabama on WNWF 1470 AM and WPNS on 1140 AM. Thank you for being here. Remember, this show is proudly sponsored by LibertyNation.com. You can access podcasts, breaking news, analysis, and a range of biting and brilliant shows to whet your appetite for freedom and your fondness for the great American Constitution. As Democrats seek new measures to curb the Second Amendment rights of law-abiding Americans in response to recent mass shooting events, it seems the blame, as always, falls on inanimate objects, guns. But is the answer to preventing these tragedies perhaps far more controversial? Well, we're fortunate to be joined by Liberty Nation's editor-in-chief, Lisa K. Donner, who recently wrote a hugely popular article on where folks maybe should be looking for answers. Thanks for coming on, Lisa.
Good to be here, Mark.
So, Lisa, in your article, you discuss a connection that's I'd say it's being widely ignored in favor of the narrative that guns are responsible for violence. What's your suggestion?
Well, we keep looking in the same place over and over again, expecting a different result, and we know that doesn't work. But anyway, an extraordinary number of these boys are taking these psychiatric medications known as selective serotonin uptake inhibitors, also known as SSRIs. You know, and it's at least worth exploring, Mark, whether there's a connection between the high level of SSRI usage in these shooters and their homicidal behaviors.
Yeah, these SSRIs, you provide the numbers that back up a clear correlation. But I think the main point of your article that everybody should go over to LibertyNation.com and read is that people just aren't studying the correlation here to see if there is actually a causation factor. Now, isn't that just bad science and therefore bad policy in terms of trying to ban guns?
Well, it could be. I mean, let's think about this, Mark. What are psychiatric drugs meant to do? Let me just ask you that question.
They're meant to alleviate the symptoms of a psychiatric disorder. Presumably.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. They're meant to alter one's behavior. So, of course, they're not designed to produce homicidal maniacs. But, you know, if you correlate the high incidence of SSRI usage in these youngsters, you can't ignore it. You have to take a look at the numbers, and the numbers are staggering. First of all, SSRI usage in America it's exploded in the last 20 years. 1 in 6 Americans are using some sort of antidepressant. And that includes a great number of kids. Now, let's take a minute and just so people don't think I'm crazy and making this up, let's look at the number of shooters. Here's just a few. Eric Harris, the Columbine shooter, was taking Zoloft and Luvox. 15-year-old Kip Cannell was on Prozac. He murdered his parents, went into his high school, killed 2 students, wounded 25 more. Jeff Weiss was 16 when he killed his grandfather and 9 other people before taking his own life. Then there was Dylan Roof. You remember him. He shot up the church in Charleston, South Carolina. He was on SSRIs. So were Stephen Kamerzak, James Holmes, Aaron Alexic, Sung Hao Cho, the Virginia Tech shooter. All mass shooters on some form of antidepressants. In fact, if you buzz around the web, a guy by the name of Jerome London categorized 39 mass shooters all taking SSRIs. This seems like an odd coincidence that at least deserves a discussion.
It does seem that nobody wants to address any other possible causes other than the prevalence of guns in society. Why are the left specifically, I think we should be looking at here, why are the left focusing all their attention on what is essentially just an inanimate object, rather than perhaps looking, as you're saying, looking at different data points that could be an explanation for the reason to create these homicidal tendencies?
Honestly, I think it's really sad, Mark, that they're taking this and making these horrible crimes into a political issue. They're using it to, try to make handguns or AR-15s or whatever firearm that's being used. They're using it for their own political purposes. And there could be many other reasons why these mass shootings are going on. Is there something happening in the educational environment? Are these kids abruptly stopping their medications? These are powerful mind-altering drugs. They aren't meant to be stopped. And, young people may be very cavalier with what's in their medicine cabinet. I don't feel like it today. I don't feel like taking it. I don't want to take it. And this causes lots of adverse effects. I mean, it says right on the label, warning, increased agitation, irritability, mania, impulsiveness, aggressiveness, hostility. Wow. Those are some things that we should pay attention to, don't you think?
Yeah, very much so. I mean, it does strike me, the point you make here about stopping the medication abruptly. So what happens is they're being treated as adults in terms of somebody prescribes them a drug that they're then expected to monitor and to take. And presumably they also have other effects that perhaps it makes the taker feel sluggish, doesn't make them feel like themselves anymore. And of course, as a teenager, you're always in that position anyway. You never really feel like yourself until you become the person that you are. And then to feel as though you're beholden to a drug that's been given to you by somebody in authority, the odds of people just ditching their medication for a day or 2 days, it's almost inevitable, isn't it, Lisa?
Well, not only that, but I'm not a doctor, but I don't know of any pediatric versions of these medicines. I don't know that there's an adolescent version of Zoloft or Prozac or, any of these other SSRIs. I think they were probably meant for adults and they're being used widely on adolescents. And this is just something that deserves a further examination.
Yeah, I don't think anybody's really willing to look into that, to be honest with you, Lisa.
Yeah, it takes too much time or effort. It's easier just to go up on the hill and, ban guns and expecting a different result. Let's face it, many of these kids, Mark, are displaying suicidal tendencies. A lot of them kill themselves after they go on their rampage. This is kind of a nihilistic view of the world. And it's, their social media profiles are filled with, threats and rage and anger, inability to, communicate and get along with parents and peers. It's a mess, but we just can't ignore that an extraordinary number of these young men are taking SSRIs.
Lisa K. Dunner, we'll be back talking about the mind of those young men very, very shortly, right after this break. Don't go anywhere. We dismiss history at our peril.
Liberty Nation Radio with Mark Angelides.
We're doing it for real, really real. Liberty Nation.
And Jeff Charles, contributor for LibertyNation.com.
I think we're starting to make an impact. Liberty style, fighting for freedom.
The tracking poll sponsored by Liberty Nation for Thursday.
Mentioned by Dan Bongino, Rasmussen, Jordan Peterson, and
I can
others.
do it again if you want me to.
Cited in Mark Levin's American Marxism.
I think we're starting to make a really big impact. Get noticed. We're doing it. Rock on.